We've been selling this saw since I was 5 years old. I'm not going to tell you how old I am right now, but that's a really long time. This is one of the handiest Japanese pull saws that we carry. It has 2 settings, open at its normal setting, and then you can back bend the blade so that if you're cutting something close to the ground or there isn't a lot of room for your knuckles, you can back bend it, and that'll just give you a little bit more space. Great tool to keep in your glove compartment of your pickup truck, in your 4-wheeler box. A lot of hikers carry them with them because they're really lightweight and they're super compact. This size actually fits nicely into a pair of work pants, that side pocket. So it is very useful for a wide variety of SARS. You just cut that whole thing. When you begin to look at the variety of Japanese hand saws out there, you're gonna find that there are many. And your biggest challenge is selecting which size you want. The key is to pick a saw that is approximately 3 times the length of the largest thing that you're cutting. And that gives you enough room so that you can get a good solid stroke out of it and actually make some headway in your cut. If it's too short, you end up doing short little strokes, and if it's much larger than what you're cutting, you know, it can just sort of wobble around a little bit. These are really arborist saws. The larger tooth is for particularly wet wood, and the finer is if you're trying to leave a very smooth cut, it's ideal. You can use the finer tooth blade on wet wood. It won't hurt the blade, but you do need to just clean out that wet sawdust pretty frequently as you're cutting. Blades are replaceable and they're interchangeable. So if you purchase one and then later decide you want the finer tooth blade, just pick up a spare blade and put it on your saw. The blades on these saws are steel. And so they absolutely can rust if they get wet, or if it's a really humid, time of year, even just sitting in your toolbox. If you're concerned with that, I would absolutely put some oil on the blade to prevent it from rusting. If it happens to get rusty, it's not the end of the world. The blade will still work beautifully. The only thing is it might leave a little bit of a rust stain on the wood that you're cutting. And as you use it, the rust will come off. Like all Japanese pull saws, they cut on the pull stroke as you're sawing through the wood. The blade is very thin, and it's thin on purpose so that the kerf that you are creating as you're cutting is smaller, which means you're creating less sawdust, which means you're working a lot less hard to cut through the wood. The drawback is that the blade is somewhat flexible. So as you're using any of the Japanese pull saws, you want to remember that less is more. As you're cutting, you don't need to use a whole lot of muscle. Let the saw do the work for you. If you are using your saw, or more likely, you lend it to somebody who's more careless with it and they end up binding it during the cut or breaking a tooth, it doesn't mean that your blade is useless. Keep using it until it's not sharp anymore. It's still a very useful blade, but mostly just don't lend it to people. This is a very special saw that you want to keep with you at all times. If there was one thing that I could change about this saw, it would be the lever here. It is metal underneath, but this piece is plastic. And if you happen to be working outside in the cold and you happen to drop your saw on a hard surface, it's possible for this to break. Otherwise, it's a perfect saw.